So the summer that I was 18 years old, just 1 or 2 years ago, I was working in a little town where Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri meet. There's a little area there along the Mississippi River where those three states meet. And it was a very beautiful area. It was a nice Missouri kind of Midwest kind of area, rolling hills and so forth. And you had the Mississippi River. They kind of wrapped around the city, had kind of a big bend there. And I did a lot of walking. I did a lot of going here and there. And at that time in my life, I liked to walk quite a bit. And I wound up in an old quarry where they had mined stone for several local buildings. And the quarry was flooded. And it was flooded by a little spring that was back in the woods that came down and filled the quarry with ice-cold water. It was very pretty. And the stream from the spring came down this little series of stones, big flat stones that made like stair step going back into the forest. And it would pool on each stone and then pour into the next one. And so I took my shoes and my socks off, and I started going back into the woods by climbing the stairs, by climbing the stone stairs. And the water pooled there, and there's mud, and it would squish between your toes, and there were little tadpoles floating around and so forth. It was very pretty that day. The light was coming through the leaves of the trees and sparkling on the water. And I came to a turn, a bend in the little creek, the little spring creek that was coming down. And as I went around the bend, it's a big stone there, larger than some of the others, and there were two little ducks. Two little ducks were floating around on the stone, and it was beautiful. And at this time, I was in some consternation. I was upset. I was annoyed. I was kind of brokenhearted at the time. And I yelled out to God, if you're there, show yourself. Come out, you coward. I called him a coward. And as I was coming around, stepping onto that big stone, the whole area seemed to, there's like a curtain went up. And the whole scene changed around me. And everything was 10 times more beautiful, 100 times. It's like the whole scene came alive. And it was a feeling that shocked me. And as I stood there, I felt like I was pulled up. And I felt like I was on fire. That my body was burning, but yet I wasn't being consumed. I also felt that I couldn't go through that experience and go back to being alive in the world. I figured that was it for me, and as a human being anyway, mortal. And it was a very, very powerful feeling. I felt as I was standing there that the God was everywhere. The answer to the question, "Where are you?" was between every atom. I felt like I was swimming in God. that the world was saturated with the presence of God. And I was taken up into a scene. Now, I don't know if my body moved at all. I wasn't outside myself, so I have no idea. But I was taken up into a scene where I was standing on a precipice, on a kind of a rock ledge. And I was looking out across all of time and space. It was an incredible scene. And in the distance before me, there was like a nebula or cloud, because it had colors. And part of that cloud was glowing. And I felt that God was present there. And it was a sense in that moment of yearning to go closer to that, but yet being afraid. And a sense came over me that if I were to see God totally, if he were to expose himself completely to me, there'd be no way that I could survive it. You know, like when he showed Moses the tip of his finger. You know, I realized that I was only seeing a fraction of God, and yet I was so overwhelmed by this experience. And you know, I was in that moment, in that time, everything made sense. All of human nonsense, all of my own foolishness, all of creation, all of physics and the chemistry, and everything came together and made sense. Everything had its place. The providence of God had its place among us. And so after that, I found myself back in the stream, and the experience faded away. And I put my shoes and socks back on, and I went back into town, and I was just like, you know, I was kind of just shaken by the whole thing. And I didn't know what I should do about it. I thought of different people that I knew there, and whether I should go talk to them about this. But I didn't. And I couldn't speak of it for about 20 years. I couldn't form the words for about 20. I was like in my 40s, or almost 40, when I could start talking about it. It was a very powerful experience, and it changed who I am, of course. And it's part of what set me on the path of coming to this place in this time, becoming a priest and so forth. And it's something it's a touchstone for me. And over the years, I understand it a little bit better. Very confused as an 18-year-old. And I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know how to share it. I had a desire to share it because I thought there was things in there that would help people. But I also felt kind of ashamed and afraid. You know, why did it happen to me? Why did it happen to someone else? You know, why? You know, if I say I had this experience, you know, people, you know, who didn't have it would yearn for it. I mean, it's hard to explain. Also, felt like, you know, that presence of God that was so strong and overwhelming was like being in the presence of love, the outpouring of love. And I've had a deep desire to bottle that feeling, that love, and be able to give it to people who need it. You know, I've come across people in my life who desperately needed that sense of God's love, and I would like to have that little bottle in my pocket where I could share that with them and bring healing to them. So I had, you know, if in this experience, this kind of had two parts. if I had only had the first part, I would have thought, okay, God saturates the world. Be a very close-in, personal sort of aspect of God. I would see God working in me or around me. But by having the second part of that image, that vision, I saw not only the close, personal, intimate aspect of God's love, the fact that He's here with us, and He's here, and He's in us, and we're in Him. But then I saw this larger image, this idea that He had other business to take care of, that He was the grandeur of God, the unbearable grandeur of God that fills the universe, and the kind that makes you feel about so tall, because He was there in all of creation, boundless across time and space. So it was a powerful experience for me that still today guides me in my actions, in my thoughts. In the first reading today, we have a reading about Cyrus the king. And God talks to Cyrus. And God talks well of Cyrus, that he is chosen and anointed, and that he has a special reason and purpose in the world. And Cyrus, by the way, is a Persian king. Not a Hebrew, not an Israelite, not a Jewish person. He was a Persian king. And so this would cause a lot of consternation to say this to the Israeli people, that Cyrus was talking to God, and God was talking to Cyrus, and that he actually calls Cyrus the Messiah because he frees the people. The Babylonians had taken the Israelites into captivity, and in some time later, the Persians conquered Babylonia, and Cyrus became king. And he chose to let the Israelites go, to free the Israelites, and let them go back to Israel. And so, God says, you didn't figure this out on your own. I was involved in this situation. I chose Cyrus, and I put him in that place in that time. And for the Israelites, that was hard because, they always saw themselves as the chosen people, in a sense that God belonged to them, And there's always talking about, in the Old Testament, even about our God and your God, and there's situations where our God is stronger than your God and so forth. And we kind of say, well, how could he deal with Cyrus? He wasn't part of the chosen people. How could he be chosen by God? And yet God, he makes a statement there. He says, I am God and there is no other. And he kind of basically tells us, you don't control, you don't define who I am. I am immense. I fill time and space, and you are. This is a small matter, and I will talk to whoever I talk to. I will choose whoever I choose, but you can't tell God how to behave and what to do. God makes it clear that He is more expansive than our little concerns. Well, He's our God, and He takes care of us, and my God's bigger than your God. He stands outside of all that. In the gospel reading, it talks about the Pharisees and the Herodians trying to trick Jesus. And they take what they think is very clever. They take this little matter about paying the tax. And paying the tax had implications to it. That it was it was part of Basically, at that time, the Romans, that's all, they took the tax from Israel. They, at that time, even allowed the Israelites to continue in their own faith. But the Romans considered Caesar their god, or a god. And so to have this little piece of metal with Caesar's face stamped on it had a meaning to it. You know, it had a meaning that this was a special, it was almost an homage to Caesar the god. And so, you know, they're trying to trap Jesus into this little problem about a piece of metal, which we call money, and we exchange among us. And so he says, well, whose image is this? Okay, well, then it must be his. But he pulls out of that narrow cubbyhole that they're trying to trap him into. You're not going to pay taxes. Well, we can bring the guards and have you hauled off. So he then changes his focus. Our focus becomes very small. We're connected to our problems and our place and in our day, and yet he says, yeah, that's not important. What Caesar's is Caesar's is what God is God's. Pay attention to what's God's. What God wants is a contrite heart. That's what he's looking for. He's trying to expand our image here and to say that God has a larger purview than we think. We think in very narrow ways. We think about what we're experiencing right now. And God, in these, what I've been talking about, tries to rip that apart and show the grandeur and expansiveness of God. And that he can't be pigeonholed. He can't be neatly packaged. We can't make a little God and put him on our shelf and keep him contained there, and he'll answer our wishes, and he'll always be there for us, and so forth. There is a very personal dimension to our relationship with God. But God himself goes well beyond that. And well beyond what we can figure out ourselves. He spans time and space. He does as he does. And a couple times in the Bible he'll say, my ways are not your ways. I have a different existence than you do. But I think the important thing to see is in some of these stories is this idea of not making a small God, not making a straw God that can easily be pushed over. A lot of the atheists and agnostics right now, they make a very small God, and then it's easy to push him over. They make a God who is weak and silly, and he can easily be blown away by a puff of wind. I suffered pain, so how could God love me if he allowed me to suffer? That's one of the big arguments. Instead of accepting that suffering and pain is a part of existence, we wouldn't know wellness without suffering. I'm part of something. I'm part of something bigger. I'm bigger than your definition of a good God. A definition of a good God that only does things that make you happy and makes your life easy. And of course, that's not the kind of God we have. It's one that we make up from time to time. Yet we have this God who is very close to us, very personal to us, that is in the midst of us, and yet at the same time sweeps through time and space and is more immense and complicated than we can imagine. Let's turn our eyes to love the expansive God, to to love the God who sees all nations and all peoples and helps us along the way towards salvation.